Segment sources. This is really the foundation of collecting the data that you would care about for your customers. So if you want that true customer 360 view to understand every little touch point along the way on the customer journey, this is the foundation for collecting that. So what I have pulled up here is segments documentation on these sources and how to go about implementing them depending on what the platform is. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And I want to get into not only the types of sources, but actually how to configure and start to set some of these things up. So the setup is the first piece. And then the event definitions and identity definitions are really the second piece to make this impactful in terms of the data you're collecting and how you're going to be using that data. So let's take a look on what's available here really quick. So if we go through this, they start to outline some of the key things that you can do. So it's either going to be a website, it's going to be some server side events or data lake, it's going to be a mobile SDK, that type of thing. It gives some examples of like what an identify call would look like so that you first initialize who that user is, what they mean to you, and then from there, you can actually start collecting events and enriching the data over time. So they go through many different approaches here. They go through the analytics JS, which is the web JavaScript. They go through the mobile SDKs, server side events, so on and so forth. And it goes on and on and on. Other things I might call out here is a source catalog. So again, there is a wide variety of out of the box ways to collect data about your users. A lot of these are just configuration based where you're grabbing API keys or app IDs to then tell Segment where to be collecting data from. Two of the most important ones I would maybe highlight are going to be first and foremost the website JavaScript. This is where essentially you're initializing the collection script, and then to that you're sending additional data to Segment once it starts to track everything that's going on your website. And you can pass in a ton of data, whether it's user IDs, traits, so on and so forth. And then you can actually start to add track calls. Track calls are maybe events that you care about. Once you've mapped out all those journeys, you then define discrete events with the metadata that you care about throughout that journey. And so you can see the syntax is pretty straightforward here. It's basically a call to that JavaScript. You're then sending a track with an event name, some number of properties, and some other configuration aspects depending on what it is that you're solving for. So I think what would be helpful is maybe to look at a couple examples. Once the script is actually initialized, you then start to define events such as this. And so you hear they're having a page view event where they're calling it pricing. They can then also send in additional data and they kind of go through everything down below. Here's an example of an identify call. Let's take a look at the HTTP API. So this is super powerful when it comes to sending custom events that you are not able to install on a website and send them from a backend process, whether it's a script or something else. So again, here's an example of what a payload might look like, where you can send these data elements into Segment in an identify call, and then you can also do the same thing or a track event, in this example, item purchase, some metadata or properties about that purchase, and any other relevant data you'd care about. And the documentation here illustrates all of that. Let's take a look at like a real example of how this might work. So in Segment, when you come to your connections, the primary implementation that most people would be dealing with is going to be the JavaScript. So this is the analytics.js that you would have. We can then go ahead and look at an example here. And it's really as simple as clicking add. You then name whatever it is that you want to add, and it's as easy as grabbing this snippet of code and adding it to your website. So literally copy, paste, go to your website, install this into the head of the website. A lot of websites, you can either do this out of the box configuration, whether it's like a WordPress site or something of that sort, or you can have your engineering team go ahead and just copy paste this into the head of the site. As soon as you do that, as soon as it's live, it is then initialized, so to speak, where it's then collecting anything on the site. And once it's initialized, you can then start sending data to it to tell Segment more about the customer and the events that are going on over that duration. So again, setting up sources is really as simple as you click add, you come in here, you find whatever the source is that you would want. website. JavaScript is the one we just looked at. You click add source, it generates your snippet of code, it generates your write keys, and you just copy paste that. Similarly, here you can do an HTTP API. With this, it'll generate all the instructions that you would need to set this up. It'll give you a write key that you then can set up your API calls to make a call, a post call to segment to that write key, and then send in whatever data you want to, again, further enrich the customer profile, whether it's identify calls or track calls.